I was 29 years old when I discovered that the college fund my father had spent 18 years building for me had been emptied in a single afternoon, and the worst part was that my mother had done it with a smile on her face, like she was doing something noble instead of destroying everything I had worked toward. My name is Charlotte Gray, and this is about the day I learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones holding the knife. It started on a Tuesday morning in September, the kind of crisp autumn day in Portland, Oregon, where the leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air smelled like rain and coffee from the cafe down the street. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, the one I could barely afford on my waitress salary, staring at my laptop screen at the acceptance letter from Portland State University's graduate program in educational psychology. I had finally done it after years of saving and planning, after putting my dreams on hold to help support my family when Dad got sick, after watching everyone else move forward while I stayed stuck in place. The letter said I had been accepted for the spring semester, and all I needed to do was confirm my enrollment and pay the first semester's tuition by October 15th. That was when I was supposed to access the college fund, the one Dad had set up for me when I was 10 years old, the one he had contributed to every single month without fail, even when money was tight. The one he had made me promise I would use to finish my education before he died 3 years ago. I called the bank that morning with my hands shaking from excitement, gave them all my information, waded through the hold music that sounded tinny and distant, and then the representative came back on the line with a tone that made my stomach drop before she even said the words. "I'm sorry, Miss Gray, but this account shows a balance of $0.37. The funds were withdrawn on August 23rd of this year." I asked her to repeat that because surely I had misheard. Surely there was some mistake. Surely the account my father had sacrificed for and protected like it was sacred couldn't just be gone. She repeated it with practiced sympathy that told me she had delivered bad news like this before, and then she told me that the withdrawal had been made by Linda Gray, my mother, who was listed as a co-owner on the account. I sat there in my apartment with the phone still pressed to my ear long after the representative had hung up, listening to the dial tone like it might eventually tell me something different. Like reality might rearrange itself into something that made sense. The fund had contained $43,000, every penny of it marked for my education. Every deposit a testament to my father's belief that I deserved better than the life he had lived. He had been a mechanic, worked 60-hour weeks with oil under his fingernails and chronic back pain that he never complained about, and he had done it all so that I wouldn't have to struggle the way he had. And now it was just gone. I drove to my mother's house in Beaverton with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Weaving through traffic on Highway 26 with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, practicing what I was going to say, and then forgetting it all over again. When I pulled up to the house where I had grown up and where Dad had died in the bedroom upstairs, I saw it immediately. Sitting in the driveway like some kind of grotesque monument to betrayal was a brand new silver Honda Civic with temporary plates and a red bow on the hood that was already starting to wilt in the drizzle. My sister Emma's car, the one she had been posting about on Instagram for the past 2 weeks with captions about how blessed she was and how amazing Mom was for making her dreams come true. Emma was 24, 5 years younger than me. And she had always been the favorite in a way that was so obvious it would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. She was the pretty one, the social one, the one who knew how to make Mom laugh and how to ask for things in a way that made you want to say yes. She had gotten her bachelor's degree in communications on a partial scholarship, and Mom's financial help moved back home after graduation, and spent the past 2 years working part-time at a boutique downtown while she figured out what she wanted to do with her life. Meanwhile, I had been working full-time since I was 18, putting myself through community college class by class, sending money home when Dad got sick, and the medical bills started piling up, putting my own dreams in a box labeled later that kept getting pushed further and further back. I walked up to the front door and let myself in with the key I still had, called out for Mom in a voice that didn't sound like my own, found her in the kitchen making coffee like it was any other morning. She looked up when I came in and smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Charlotte, honey, I didn't know you were coming over. Do you want some coffee?" I asked her about the college fund, asked her straight out where the money had gone, and I watched her face shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked almost like defensiveness. She set down her coffee mug with a careful click against the granite countertop and said, "Oh, sweetie, I was going to talk to you about that. Emma needed a car for her new job, and you know how important it is for her to make a good impression. And besides, you've been saying you were going to go back to school for years now. I didn't think you were actually serious about it this time." The words hit me like a physical blow, like she had reached across the kitchen and slapped me. I asked her how she could do that, how she could take the money Dad had saved for me, the money that was supposed to be mine, and she got that tight look around her mouth that she always got when she thought someone was being unfair to her. She said, "That money was in a joint account, Charlotte. Legally, I had every right to use it, and Emma is your sister. You should be happy for her instead of being so selfish about this. Your father would have wanted us to help each other out as a family." I told her that Dad had wanted me to finish my education, that he had told me that specifically before he died, that he had made me promise. And she waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly and said, "Your father said a lot of things when he was sick, Charlotte. You can't hold on to every little comment like it was written in stone." Emma came downstairs then, drawn by the sound of raised voices, and she looked between me and Mom with wide eyes and asked what was wrong. I turned to her and asked if she knew where the money for her car had come from, watched her face carefully for any sign of guilt or shame, and she glanced at Mom before saying, "Mom said she had been saving up for it. She said she wanted to do something nice for me." I told her the truth then, told her that the $38,000 car sitting in the driveway had been bought with my college fund, with the money Dad had spent 18 years saving for me, and I watched the color drain from her face as she realized what had happened. She looked at Mom and said, "You told me you had savings. You said this was your money." And Mom's face hardened in a way that told me she was about to make this everyone else's fault but her own. Mom said, "This is exactly the kind of drama I was trying to avoid. Charlotte, you are making such a big deal out of nothing. Emma needed a reliable car, and you don't even have your license yet, so what were you going to do with that money anyway? And besides, I helped you out plenty when you were younger. I bought you things and paid for your expenses, so really this is just me evening things out." The logic was so twisted, so fundamentally wrong, that I couldn't even formulate a response at first. I did have my license. I had gotten it at 16 just like everyone else. I just couldn't afford a car because I had been sending money home to help with Dad's medical bills, and the idea that buying me clothes and food when I was a child somehow meant she could steal from me as an adult was insane. I left the house that day with my hands shaking and my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall in front of them, sat in my car in their driveway with my head against the steering wheel, and called my friend Marcus, who was a paralegal at a firm downtown. I told him everything in a rush of words that probably didn't make much sense, and he listened without interrupting until I was done, and then he said, "Charlotte, I need you to breathe and listen to me. What your mother did might not be criminal because of the joint account, But there are legal options here. Your father's intent matters, and if you can prove that the money was earmarked for your education, you might be able to make a case for conversion or breach of fiduciary duty." I asked him what that meant in plain English, and he said, "It means we might be able to get that money back, or at least the car that was bought with it. But you need to be prepared for this to get ugly because you are going to have to take your own family to court." I spent the next week gathering documentation, digging through every box in my apartment until I found the folder Dad had given me when I turned 18, the one that had all the account statements and the letter he had written explaining that this money was for my education and nothing else. The one where he had specifically written, "This fund is for Charlotte's college expenses only, to be used when she is ready to pursue higher education. This is my gift to her future." I found emails between me and Dad where we had talked about my plans to go back to school, text messages where he had encouraged me to chase my dreams, photos of us at my community college graduation where he had been so proud even though I knew he was in pain. I compiled it all into a neat file and took it to Marcus, who looked through it with the kind of careful attention that told me he took this seriously, and then he said, "This is good, Charlotte. This is really good. We can work with this." The lawyer Marcus connected me with was a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in family law and estate disputes. And she had sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that was firm and confident. She reviewed my documentation during our first meeting in her office on the 10th floor of a building downtown, looked up at me when she was done and said, "Your father's intent is crystal clear here, Miss Gray, and the fact that your mother used these funds for a purpose entirely contrary to that intent while you were actively planning to use them for education is significant. We can file a claim for constructive trust and potentially get the car transferred to you or force its sale with the proceeds going to restore your educational fund. But I want you to understand that this will damage your relationship with your family, possibly beyond repair." I told her that my relationship with my family was already damaged beyond repair, that the moment my mother chose to steal from me, she had severed whatever trust we had left, and that I wanted to move forward. We filed the lawsuit in October, and the process of having my mother and Emma served with papers was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. My mother called me within an hour of being served, screaming into the phone about how I was tearing the family apart over money, how I was being vindictive and cruel, how Dad would be ashamed of me for doing this. I let her yell until she ran out of breath, and then I said very calmly, "Dad would be ashamed of you for stealing from me, for taking the money he worked himself to exhaustion to save, for betraying his trust and mine. And if you want to make this right, you can return the car and we can settle this without going to court." She hung up on me without another word. Emma called me later that night, and her voice was different, smaller, and she said, "Charlotte, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know where the money came from. Mom told me she had been saving for years, and I feel sick about this. But I also can't just give back the car because I need it for work, and I already signed a contract for my job that requires reliable transportation." I told her that I understood she had been lied to, that I didn't blame her for accepting the gift, but that the car had been bought with stolen money whether she knew it or not, and that if she wanted to make this right, she could support me in court or at least stay neutral. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I can't go against Mom, Charlotte. She is all I have left." And I realized that even though Emma knew the truth, even though she understood what had been done to me, she was still going to choose the person who had wronged us both because it was easier than standing up for what was right. The legal process took 4 months, and those were some of the hardest months of my life. My mother hired a lawyer who argued that because she was a co-owner on the account, she had every legal right to use the funds as she saw fit. that my father's letter was merely a statement of intent and not a legally binding restriction, that I had waited too long to pursue my education and therefore had forfeited any claim to the money. Patricia tore those arguments apart piece by piece, presented evidence of my consistent intent to return to school, showed that I had been delayed by my father's illness and my need to support the family financially, demonstrated that my mother had known exactly what that money was for and had chosen to violate that trust anyway. We had to sit through depositions where my mother looked at me with genuine hatred in her eyes and said things that were designed to hurt me, where she called me ungrateful and selfish and said I had always been difficult, where she tried to paint herself as a struggling single mother who had done her best with 2 daughters and limited resources. The trial was held in February in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and recycled air, and I had to sit there and listen to my mother's lawyer try to make me sound like a failure, like someone who had squandered opportunities and was now trying to blame others for my own shortcomings. I had to watch my mother cry on the stand in a performance so convincing that I almost believed it myself. Watch her talk about how hard it had been after Dad died, how she had just been trying to help both her daughters succeed, how she had never meant to hurt anyone. And then Patricia put me on the stand, and I got to tell the truth in my own words, got to explain what that money had meant to me and to my father, got to describe the moment I found out it was gone and the betrayal I felt, got to read Dad's letter out loud in a courtroom full of strangers while my mother sat there and refused to look at me. The judge was an older man with gray hair and a face that gave nothing away, and when both sides had rested their cases, he took 2 days to deliberate before calling us back for his ruling. I sat in that courtroom with my hands clenched in my lap and my heart beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it, and I listened as he said that based on the evidence presented, it was clear that the funds in question had been earmarked for my educational expenses by the original contributor, that my mother had breached her fiduciary duty as a co-owner by using those funds for an unrelated purpose, and that the appropriate remedy was to impose a constructive trust on the vehicle purchased with those funds and order its transfer to me with the option to sell it and use the proceeds for their intended educational purpose. He ordered my mother to surrender the title and keys within 7 days, and he ordered Emma to return the vehicle to my mother so that it could be transferred to me. The silence in the courtroom after the ruling was deafening, and then my mother made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a scream, and her lawyer had to physically restrain her from coming at me. Emma just sat there with tears running down her face, and I felt nothing, absolutely nothing, just a kind of hollow victory that tasted like ashes in my mouth. I had won. I had proven that I was right, and that what had been done to me was wrong. But the cost of that victory was the complete destruction of whatever family I had left. The car was transferred to me on a gray morning in March, and I drove it off the lot where it had been stored during the legal proceedings, this silver Honda Civic that represented so much more than transportation. That was the physical manifestation of my father's stolen dream for me and my mother's betrayal and my sister's complicity. I sold it 2 weeks later for $36,000, which was less than it had cost, but still enough to cover most of my tuition and fees for graduate school, still enough to prove that some things are worth fighting for even when the fight breaks you. I started my graduate program that fall, enrolled in classes on child development and educational psychology, sat in lecture halls with students who were 5 years younger than me and had no idea what I had gone through to get there. I thought about my father every single day, wondered if he would be proud of what I had done or horrified that I had torn the family apart, wondered if he had known what my mother was capable of when he made her a co-owner on that account, or if he had trusted her the way I once had. I came to understand that sometimes love isn't enough, that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you will hurt you in ways you never imagined possible, and that choosing yourself over family loyalty isn't selfish when that family has already chosen to sacrifice you for their own convenience. My mother and I haven't spoken since the day of the ruling, and Emma sends me a text message every few months asking if we can talk, asking if enough time has passed for me to forgive them, asking if I understand how hard this has been for her. I never respond because there is nothing left to say, because forgiveness isn't something you owe to people who haven't earned it. Because understanding someone's pain doesn't mean you have to absolve them of the damage they caused. Emma had to buy herself a used car with her own money, had to learn what it felt like to work for something instead of having it handed to her, and maybe that was the best lesson my mother could have accidentally taught her. I think about the car sometimes, about how something that was supposed to be a symbol of sisterly love and maternal generosity became instead a monument to theft and betrayal. I think about how my mother must have felt signing those papers at the dealership, using money that wasn't hers to buy something for the daughter she loved more. And I wonder if she felt even a flicker of guilt, or if she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. I think about Emma driving that car for those few months, posting photos of it online, feeling grateful and blessed, having no idea that every mile she drove was paid for with my stolen future. Sometimes I drive past my mother's house on my way to campus, and I slow down just enough to see the empty driveway where that car used to sit, and I feel something that isn't quite satisfaction, but isn't regret either. Something harder and sharper and more permanent. I won in court but lost a family, gained justice but sacrificed belonging, and I learned that sometimes the price of standing up for yourself is standing completely alone, but that doesn't mean you were wrong to do it. It just means that some people will always choose comfort over courage, and some betrayals are too fundamental to ever overcome. And some battles are worth fighting even when you know that winning will cost you everything you thought you couldn't live without. Because in the end, the only person you have to face in the mirror every morning is yourself. And I can live with the person I see there, even if my mother and sister can't.